Afternoon, everyone. I'm Luke, I'm a director here at Sheehan. Welcome to our latest webinar panel discussion. Does every cloud have a silver lining? The guys will be formally introducing themselves in a minute, but I'd like to welcome to the panel Nayana Shetty from the Financial Times, Chris West of Toyota Connected Europe, Dave Stockton from Confluent, Abs Mungul from Zoopla, Mark Pashby of Cazoo joining us as well. Please do use the Q&A button on the side to ask any questions as we have a Q&A discussion at the end, but please feel free to put your questions into the box at the side as we go along. I'm going to hand over to Nayana now, and then to Mark, who'll be our moderators today, and but they're both going to get fully involved as panelists too. So if I can hand over to you, Nayana, thanks very much.
Thanks, Luke, and thank you everyone for joining today, this afternoon. And I would like to kick us off with asking our panelists to introduce themselves and also give like 1 or 2 lines about how your cloud journey has been so far. So Chris, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. So my name's Chris West. I'm head of cloud engineering at Toyota Connected Europe, in a role I've been in for about a year. Prior to that, I've worked in a number of similar roles in industry around DevOps lead, head of cloud adoption, this kind of thing. And in my career, I've been responsible for consulting in DevOps, leading DevOps and cloud engineering teams, building FCA compliant payments platforms natively on cloud, and establishing effectively a cloud center of excellence, service delivery function for cloud infrastructure at Toyota Connected Europe.
Thank you, Chris. David, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm sure, thanks. So I'm currently Senior Engineering Manager at Confluent, which is the company founded by the creators of Apache Kafka. So I look after the teams responsible for Kubernetes cloud deployments across the 3 major cloud providers, about a few tens of thousands of production instances, and also look after the common cloud storage patterns for object and block storage that we use. My personal cloud journey, I started off as what I call a classically trained software engineer. So I did my bachelor's in software engineering and loved everything software engineering. And around the time VMs were really growing in popularity, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Wouldn't it be wonderful if someone else could run those VMs for me? And then lo and behold, here we have cloud computing. More recently worked for a Java APM product company that had a SaaS offering as well as an on-prem offering, which the SaaS offering was in the cloud, and I did a lot of consultancy helping customers deploying the on-prem version in their own cloud accounts. Moved to a fintech company where we had a really broad range of tech, move from VMware over to AWS, trying to remain cloud agnostic. And then, I'd say more recently now at Confluent, where when I joined the company, they were purely cloud part of the organization. So for my current role, I've only ever worked with cloud offerings across the 3 major public cloud providers. Thanks.
Nice. That's a varied range of industries that you've worked in. I'm sure all of these experiences will come in handy in a discussion today. Mark, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Nayana. So my name is Mark. I'm Platform Engineering Manager at Cazoo, which is a cloud native company. But I'll be drawing upon my experiences in other roles and other companies that I've worked at, where I've worked mainly in AWS as a public cloud, across a varying number of different platforms and services in that cloud provider. Yeah, so that's me. Nayana, if you'd like to give an intro to yourself and your experiences.
Sure. I am Nayana Shetty, and I've been working in the Financial Times for around 6 years now. So I'm a principal engineer there, overseeing a couple of teams in FT.com and the mobile apps. And before that, I've been working in projects in the infrastructure side of things, and also engineering enablement teams. So basically getting all of the other teams on the whole cloud journey and stuff. So cloud, from my experience, has been a way for FT to actually enable innovation and also to actually speed our delivery to market. So that's how I would say our cloud journey has been.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nayana. So Abs, if you'd like to give an intro to yourself and your experiences.
Sure. Hi, I'm Abs. I'm head of site reliability engineering at Zoopla. I've been with Zoopla for just over a year now. I'm also going to be drawing on my experiences at previous companies, and my cloud journey, I guess, started at a creative agency where we started looking at moving our mail services to Gmail. And then thereafter at a fintech where we were building a payments platform, and I was really kind of focused on the DevOps side of the culture and evangelizing moving towards the cloud. So quite a varied experience, mainly on AWS and Google Cloud.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Abs. So to kick off with the first questions for the panel, so what are the benefits of moving to the cloud, and why would businesses, or why should businesses consider a move to the cloud? So Abs, if you'd like to jump in and answer that.
Sure. I guess the main thing is reduce of total cost of ownership is one of the factors, but really the main factor would be around competitive advantage and innovation and the ability to move fast. So by moving cloud, I mean, a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting is taken away from you, and you have access to a huge technology palette of services that you can just consume without actually having to build it from scratch. So agility, innovation, and are the main kind of factors for moving to cloud.
Brilliant, thank you, Abs. David, do you have anything to draw on there for this particular question?
Yeah, so I think the big one there for me is also the simplification of billing and all those surrounding assets that go along with making any decisions within a large organization. I think it's quite often not necessarily the people within the engineering organization that want to move or can move and have got great ideas, but as Abs was saying, that ability to move fast is often outside your control with things like, let's do a legal review of this contract and let's see, where does it go? If you've put that all under one umbrella, that simplifies a lot of that and takes away some of those. So that all counts towards the TCO.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Nayana or Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? I mean, I wanted to jump in as well and answer this as well. Okay, so yeah, for me, I mean, I completely agree with Abs and David in the respect that I think the key takeaways for looking at cloud migrations and the offerings that are available is obviously that team agility and autonomy. It means that the product teams can concentrate on actually writing features, developing the products, rather than actually worrying about the platform and the infrastructure, which is a really big win there. So yeah, that's my point on that. Cool. So moving on to the next question. What are your thoughts on cloud agnosticism? And is this something that businesses should be investing in? And that question, can I open up to Nayana first of all?
Sure, yeah. So I think, in my head, cloud agnostic actually means you can host in any of the different cloud providers that we've got. And for the FT at least, what is the way we've considered this is FT is not a data hosting company. It's the differentiating factor of the FT or the competitiveness is journalism. So it's all about how do we provide world-class journalism in a way that is consistent for all our users. With this in mind, I think we have heavily invested in AWS. So we've decided not to go with cloud agnostic, but actually use tools and frameworks in place that can help us if one day AWS decided we wouldn't be hosting anymore. I would suspect that would be, I mean, I can't even think of that being a reality any day, but if that happened, we actually have some measures in place. And also, I think the way we're doing this is by thinking about building, buying or building. So do we actually build a product, or can we actually buy something off the shelf? So instead of us actually hosting our own cloud solutions, we've used past solutions like Heroku to actually do all of our hosting for us. So we don't have to really care about, so as an engineer, I would have to develop a Node or a Python module and then ship it off to Heroku, and it does all of it. So from my perspective, if Heroku said we wouldn't be hosting, it's the same Node module that I could probably host off somewhere else, and it would still do the same thing. So that is how I think we have tried to balance it out, rather than over engineering and trying to actually get it working across different platforms.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nayana. That was really good. So David, do you have any points you'd like to bring up with regards to this question?
Yeah, so I think quite often I've seen people looking into solutions to try and improve the capability for being cloud agnostic. One of the things I hear very often from engineers that are first coming across common tools like Terraform, for example, like, it's great, it can help us be cloud agnostic. But in reality, very often your Terraform code is just completely cloud specific. It doesn't really solve that problem. Sure, it's a single tool for the job, and you can use those concepts for another cloud, but in reality, it's essentially a full rewrite. And similarly with other vendor-based solutions where you might use another third-party SaaS for being able to control your multiple cloud providers, that they realistically have many of the similar problems. You have to send specific attributes because every cloud operates slightly differently. The right scale, or maybe you're running Rancher yourselves and trying to do some of these kinds of concepts. But really, you need to worry about, are you locking into a smaller vendor? Perhaps it's a better idea that you lock into AWS, who's very unlikely to go anywhere anytime soon, than perhaps another smaller vendor that may be offering you a potential for something else that's still an awful lot of engineering work, but perhaps maybe taking Nayana's approach of, have some disaster recovery plans, that what would you do if all else fails, but yeah, maybe not such a good idea to try and lock into a smaller vendor.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. That's a really good point. Abs, so do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, sure. I kind of agree with both Nayana and David's view, but I kind of tend to take a capabilities view on all the SaaS providers, PaaS providers, and cloud providers combined. So really, based on the business requirement, there is a layer of complexity that you need to add if you're going to be truly cloud agnostic, and is it really worth it? So if it is, then it's worth the investment. But if it's not, maybe look at things from a capability perspective and simplification. So if you're looking at an authentication service, rather than building your own on top of a cloud provider, maybe look at a SaaS provider that can provide that capability, or a mixture of cloud providers. So you might want to host your compute in AWS, and then maybe you'll do your data processing in Google Cloud. But the caveat to that is you need to have a cloud center of excellence, right? So you need to get the mindset around using cloud right first, before starting to look at how you can be multi-cloud and start looking at different cloud providers. So my view is really based on risk profile and business context, and that really should then decide whether you're going to truly go cloud agnostic versus not.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abs. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think my experience in these cases as well is pretty much exactly the same. And I'd like to draw on what David mentioned with regards to the technical details of moving across different cloud providers, right? From especially from an infrastructure as code perspective, it's very difficult to achieve that. And drawing on what Abs made as a point there with regards to the different requirements and capabilities of those services or offerings from the public cloud. So maybe looking at different business domains, data as an example, as you mentioned, Abs, they might want to use something like GCP instead, with BigQuery or something, whereas product engineering teams might be more interested in the AWS platform as a service offerings that they have there. So yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. Brilliant. So yeah, I think Nayana, I'm handing over to you for the next question.
I think I would like to ask Chris if you had an experience with Cloud Agnostic and should we really be investing in Cloud Agnosticity?
Yes. So I've been in a couple of situations where we've had to make decisions about cloud agnosticism and how we want to treat our cloud service providers. And it's really important that if you have the opportunity to set a strategy, because one of the risks with cloud is that because it's so easy to adopt it, I've got a credit card, now I'm away, I don't have to wait 6 to 8 weeks for a server to be shipped, I can just get on with it. There is a lot of danger around sprawl. So having a strategy, first of all, is important. But then the next thing is that there are some software engineering principles that apply. So first of all, the law of leaky abstractions. As we were talking about before with Terraform, on the surface is an abstraction that sits on top of your cloud service provider. But anybody who's done any work with Terraform knows that each provider is cloud specific and every single activity you do is cloud specific. And Terraform doesn't really have value as an abstraction. It has value because of automation and a number of other things. And then the second software engineering principle that applies is you ain't gonna need it. So in the early days of digital at Travelex, we had this opportunity to either embrace a particular cloud provider or build an agnostic layer over the top. And really we were thinking about it there in terms of what if AWS go bust, or what if we want to arbitrage between cloud providers. Now, you ain't going to need it says that the amount of additional time to invest in that abstraction done up front is very expensive. And if you defer that cost until you need it, well, the worst case scenario is you still have to invest that time later on. And the best case scenario is you can spend that time instead on delivering value to the business, becoming more mature more quickly with your current cloud offering and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Chris. I think that kind of segues nicely into what makes a successful cloud transition. Like our topic for today says, is cloud for everyone? I would want to start off with Abs, if you want to give your thoughts on this.
I guess successful migration to cloud is really centered around the culture and the mindset. And we found that out at Travelex, right? So it's really making everyone understand the value, but also providing the skills so that it helps with that mindset change. And a lot of that could be centered around, reading books. So like the Phoenix Project is a really excellent book around the Devops culture and how to execute towards, a DevOps mindset. So really having the mindset change backed with a strategy, and then starting to use, fight Conway's law, right? By perhaps looking at inverse Conway and looking at a model of something that does look good and say, this is how cloud could provide benefit, and start moving towards that. But really the major focus should be on the culture and skilling up your workforce to understand how to use cloud and get the best value out of cloud. Because fundamentally, the move to cloud is to benefit the business, right? Is to add business value and start being more competitive and moving faster. So those are my thoughts. And lastly, I think Chris mentioned this as well, which is a cloud center of excellence is really important as part of that cultural change as well.
Yeah. And Mark, what do you think are like the metrics that we will need to think about when we're thinking about cloud transitions and migrations?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's one of the key learnings for myself in past experiences, is that it's really important to measure before a migration happens, or you're even looking to do a migration. Having as many KPIs and metrics as possible, and looking at all the different data exhausts that you have across your tech organization, and actually collecting those things, right? Because that data is really important. If you don't have it, then you've got nothing to measure moving forward. So it's really important, first of all, to have that measuring in place. And then the sort of metrics that you would want to be looking at is obviously things like application performance, like have things gotten faster or slower when you've moved into the cloud or migrated into the cloud. You would also want to look at things like reliability for your application as well, and also the stableness of that application. Other sort of metrics you'd be interested in. And also, it's not just the tech metrics as well, or the availability metrics. You also need to look at the business side as well. So, you need to communicate with products and customer teams as well to find out, are you losing any kind of customers as well? Is there any kind of correlation to be found there after a cloud migration? And obviously, you need to look at all the peaks and troughs of seasonal events as well. Things that happen, when your traffic's kind of upscaling or downscaling as well. So yeah, that's the kind of things that you want to look at there, in my experience.
Yeah, and I think to add to that from an FT's perspective, we've also thought about things like sensitive data, and is it worth having our sensitive data in the cloud? As an example of it is, within the FT, we have journalists doing investigation kind of pieces that before a news is broken, all of the data that they gather and build their story around either expose or a big event. It's those kind of data. I would suspect that a lot of journalists wouldn't be comfortable having that on a cloud provider and like having it sitting on an infrastructure which is outside of the company itself. So I think that there's an element of sensitivity of our data that we will have to consider as well. Chris, I know you have a very good story around how this could go all wrong. So do you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, and actually, and before I do that, I just wanted to pick up on one thing. So, at Travelex, the sensitivity of data and the regulatory story was actually a driver to move to cloud rather than a blocker from moving, because and the rhetoric that we used was that AWS, which is our cloud service provider of choice, employ thousands of people to ensure that their service provision meets all of the industry standards and specific industry standards in finance, where we were focused. And so their teams responsible for that and maintaining that are always going to be an order of magnitude or two orders of magnitude bigger and better funded. And so when you look at the services we deliver and the infrastructure that sits underneath, if we can move our limited resources above the line and let this be handled effectively by our outsourced supplier, then that surely has to be good for the business as a whole. So that rule doesn't apply in every industry segment, obviously, but certainly within our little financial services bubble at Travelex, that was a compelling argument for at least some of what we did. But I suppose the question really is about culture, isn't it? And there is a quote that's attributed to Peter Drucker, but it's not him, it's someone else, who said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so I wrote a business case to transition 6 data centers worth of applications from on-prem systems to cloud. And from a business investment perspective, it made a lot of sense, but the execution of it really foundered because culture ate the strategy for breakfast. And really the challenge was that organizationally and as a group of people, we were very heavily invested in on-premises IT service delivery. And it's very hard to sell to the people responsible for that really it should be outsourced to AWS. Right down to the security guard who looked after the physical property in the basement of the office building. Like, what is he going to do with his time when all of those servers are in Dublin somewhere? You know, there was a lot of resistance. The A10 load balancer team saying to them, well, it's a screw-in device in a rack in the basement on AWS. It's a network load balancer, an ALB and one API call away. So perhaps you should learn how to do that instead of being defined by the technology. That was the challenge. It was the organization had invested in an IT service delivery culture, very tightly coupled to the functional delivery of what they were doing. And when we came and produced a very compelling case to transition to cloud, we met a lot of resistance because of that.
And I think a major part of any cloud transition is actually, as I think Abs mentioned and we've now mentioned, is the whole mindset shift and the whole culture of like moving away from the traditional way of hosting and managing to actually making sure security is given much more and your privacy of your data sets is given much more importance than where it's actually living, where the data is living and stuff. On a similar note, the questions for David. What is your experience been with the culture and mindset side of things, and especially when we're working with large scale moves that we do and stuff?
Yeah, I really resonates very similarly to what Chris was saying. You know, you have people make a business, you know, whether it's people that are a security guard in a data center that maybe is going to have to close one day, right through to the software engineers that you know, are deploying to the cloud, and you really have to consider them, and not only the current people, because change does worry some people. They may be vested in certain technologies that you're no longer going to use because they don't fit with a cloud strategy. So, you know, perhaps if they're not interested in learning in a new area, they want to specialize, and they are, you know, senior specialists in a certain technology, it may not be right for them to remain with the organization. So can you hire the new people with the new skills that you want? What's the hiring pool look like for your organization? And can you invest in growing the existing staff that you have? Are they interested in learning the new technologies? Is the cloud that you choose one of interest? Is it a growing cloud provider? Is it a cloud provider that is losing business and, you know, may not be surviving the journey? You know, I think we can see from the three major cloud providers, there's definitely been shifts over the last few years, and other, you know, smaller cloud providers have come and gone. You know, is it the right choice for the people that are there? And then that sort of links very much to autonomy. I think autonomy is always very important, even if it's not a cloud journey. I think it's a huge piece. One of the things that cloud journeys tend to unlock is the capability to be more autonomous. So that can often play into it, the improvements in autonomy, but certainly resonating with what Chris said, people first or every time.
And Mark, do you have anything to add on how either in a cloud native environment or from your previous experiences?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Nayana. So yeah, I mean, I think I very much so agree with what the panel's been saying on this and the experiences that they have. I think that, you know, I think we've all encountered Luddites before, right? You know, people that are afraid of change. They don't really want to look at new technologies and things like that. But I think, you know, there's obviously a lot of success stories we've probably all seen as well, right? You know, a lot of positives where you see engineers that maybe you know, operations engineers or traditional systems administrators that then get into the flow of learning new cloud technologies and actually transition on, right? You know, they learn new things, they upskill themselves, and they start figuring out that there's a lot of features and options to use out there across the different public cloud providers. And I think that becomes a very powerful thing. So yeah, I think just a reaffirmation of what everyone said, really. Yeah.
And I think to add to it, so FT went through the whole cloud only phase in the last year. So towards end of 2020 is when we said we're all cloud only now. And I think the main criteria for us when we were doing these things is three things we had in mind. The first one was having clarity around what we were trying to do and how it would affect people. Second one was communication, making sure we had continuous communication with our people, so they didn't feel like they were left out of the whole migration, and also what would their role look like once we have migrated, and taking them on that journey basically. And the third one, which I felt like was the most important thing that we had to get right, was empathy. And we used to kind of theories and like processes that work for us. One was this nudge theory, where instead of actually saying you should do this and enforce people, we actually use the carrot model of we show some carrots to how things are going to get better, how you can innovate, and how it would improve your experience, and use that to actually get people along on the journey. And the other thing that we used quite a lot was this acronym called EAST, which is make it easy. So remove any blockers for people during migrations, and then make it attractive. So it is easy for, as an organization, to actually be attracted to go and work for and find new opportunities, even if they decided to move out of the company and stuff. And the third one is being social, as in compare progress with like public commitments, and make sure that everyone is aware, and from a top-down approach as well, make people at the top realize that this is not just an IT job. This is going to actually bring value to the business, and it has to be timely. So these communications that we make, if they are delayed, like if you say we are going to move a data center and the comms goes only a week after we have started the migration, there's a lot of panic within the people. So I think it's getting those the EAST acronym right is quite useful in this case. Mark, do you want to take on?
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Nayana. I'm going to have to remember that acronym now. I think that's really good. Thank you for that. So yeah, last up, I guess the question that we want to ask the panel is, so what's the end goal of a cloud transition, and what does success look like, and what can cloud adoption help unlock within a business? This is kind of like an open question to the panel in general.
I don't mind going first. So I guess the main thing it unlocks is agility and innovation, as well as competitive advantage. And I guess success looks like you're no longer focusing, you're seeing the cloud as a commodity, right? So you're focusing on the business value and not the things that the business doesn't actually really care about, which is the infrastructure. The infrastructure is just a supporting bit of technology that is consumed. And really, you know, if you look at like the book Accelerate as an example, where, you know, there's heavy research around how a DevOps culture and that tight cohesion and collaboration around technology allows you to innovate and move faster, and how that can be applied to cloud. So, you know, the DORA metrics can be one of the measures of looking at velocity and frequency of deployments, and how the health of your development lifecycle is being applied on the cloud. So for me, it's, you know, it's really centered around unlocking that innovation. And you should always, in my opinion, start with the most simplest things. So consume as much of the managed services within the cloud provider, and then incrementally add complexity where there's a business requirement to do that, or there's some sort of technical blocker. So you should always be like one step behind the innovation of the cloud provider. So, you know, you're consuming as much as possible from the cloud provider, and then just like focusing on your own core competency as a business.
Yeah, that's a great point, Abs. That's really good. So yeah, does anyone have anything to chime in on that one?
I can add to this. So I think for us, it has also been about developer experience, and I think that can take us a long way in terms of how much tech depth we collect over time, and how much like what kind of engineers are we attracting. So migration to the cloud is not just a data hosting solution, but it's also to do with the culture and the business value aspects of it as well. And the other thing is the cost, obviously, and an easy way to see your cost.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Nayana. David and Chris, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've written a couple of different business cases for cloud transitions, and there's probably 3 different kind of overall justifications for doing it based on my experience. So, in one case, we were using the cloud migration as a vehicle to really uplift the whole kind of security and operations and other kind of infrastructure technical debt position of the organization. So there had been historic underinvestment in IT services, and so the transition of systems from on-prem to cloud was the sort of visible side of it, but underneath we were also uplifting operating system versions, bringing in new remote administration capabilities, standardizing security controls, and all of these kinds of things as part of that transition process. And so it was an opportunity to tackle a lot of endemic technical debt in the infrastructure. So that's one kind of example of what good looks like, is to take that opportunity. In another environment, we used it as an opportunity to say, of this limited pool of engineering resource, and that is an industry-wide problem, and Accenture have done studies on it of, how many millions of hajillions of pounds are lost in GDP because of the skills gap. But given that we have limited engineering skills, we need to focus those on building things that the business wants to make more money. And so as much as we can, that is just facilitating that should be somebody else's problem. And in this context, our cloud service provider's problem. And again, in that context, we used the cloud transformation to help push as much of the undifferentiated heavy lifting, as AWS like to put it, down to AWS, so that we could focus on the really valuable stuff.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there was a few things from Abs now and Chris I really picked up on. So the DORA metrics, I think if anyone hasn't looked at those, definitely go do some research on them. It's a really relatively simple and fantastic way just to get a really good metric that will show you what's going on and what is the health of your dev life cycle. So yeah, just sort of +1 to that. One with the costs, I think very often you see quite polarizing views on the costs. Yet people say, let's move to cloud, it's really cheap. Yet other people, we can't move to cloud, it's not very cheap. But I think the key there is what Nayana touched on, which is it's an easy way to view costs, whether they're more, whether they're less. It's so much simpler to attribute costs across different areas of the business. Whether you're tagging instances or you've moved to Kubernetes and you're tagging pods, and you can identify costs at much more granular levels. Visibility is king. It's like many of these things we keep saying, we want to look at what the situation is before a cloud migration. We want to look at the situation after a migration. We want to look at the health of our dev lifecycle. Give me some more metrics, please. Lots of metrics. It's fantastic. Yeah, just backing up what Chris said as well with the cloud migration, that there's it can quite often be unpalatable to present ideas to re-architect entire or masses of systems. It's not all win. For example, I've been in positions where cloud providers don't offer the technology that we've chosen and invested in, and they don't have a hosted offering. I guess MongoDB is a relatively newish one that AWS and other cloud providers have started to delve into over the last few years. But historically, if they didn't have an offering, then you're managing that yourselves. And how do you go about sort of mitigating those risks or handling those? The good one for me, which was sort of ending Chris's point, the limited engineering resources. We come back to people. It's always people. Everyone across every problem, every decision. It's always about the people. So yeah, it was great.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Yeah, I guess from my own perspective, just echoing again the DORA metrics. I think having the Accelerate book on the main library of all of the companies is a very important step to looking at those things. And I think that, yeah, I mean, the characteristics of the architecture of high-performing teams is kind of well suited to cloud adoption, right? Because it allows them to move really, really quickly, and that's a really critical point to think about as well. Especially when you want to concentrate time on products and actually doing what your business does. Yeah, that's my point.
Thanks, guys. We've got some questions coming, so I'll I mean, whoever's best to answer, please feel free. This is from Manny. Cloud agnosticism. Why do we need to develop this way? For example, if I'm switching from AWS to Azure, that is useful, but if we're going to swap like this, it will mean additional cost. Compliance policies are different, so isn't it going to mean more work?
I think that for me, if I can jump in on some of that, there are many companies that operate across multiple clouds to begin with, and they're typically some of the most successful operations where you can switch between cloud providers. If there's an outage within a certain cloud provider or a certain service you feel is letting you down, you can migrate away and use one of the other cloud providers. You already have the operational experience in multi-cloud and so on. So in my personal history with this, it's a lot less about saying, okay, we're going to turn off AWS, we're going to turn on GCP. That tends to not happen and be a much more difficult transition. Whereas if you put some of the building blocks in early on and you kind of can split your bets across multiple cloud providers, then that will help. However, equally, balancing the costs. If you put a commit in with a certain cloud provider, you're going to get larger discounts with one compared to splitting that. So it is a double-edged sword.
Can I also add, it's also around the amount of failure you're willing to take as a company. So don't do cloud agnosticism for the sake of it, for mitigating risks. There's always going to be a vendor lock-in. And I guess like most of the cloud providers have a high level of tolerance on failure. So what are you optimizing for? Is it actually, disperseness because you're a global company and you might have latency issues? Is it DR? So it shouldn't be the default thing where you take a data center mindset and map that to a cloud across many cloud providers. So it really just depends on your risk profile as a business and what you're optimizing for.
So from my experience, so first of all, why would you even consider cloud agnosticism? A lot of the conversation we've had is about why you wouldn't do it. The reason why you would do it is if you want to run global services, which include countries like Russia or China or the Middle East, other areas of the globe where there might be data legislation or domain-specific legislation. So in finance, certainly you have to do what the central bank tells you to do in a region, and the reason's a cloud service provider present. So that's a compelling reason to think beyond what a particular cloud service provider can do. And then the how of it, certainly in my current role, the way that we're tackling this is rather than investing a lot in a strict abstraction from cloud service provider, which again falls into this, you ain't gonna need it, kind of challenge. Instead of us saying, well, we'll use best of breed open source technologies. So let's say we'll use Postgres for our relational databases rather than a proprietary one. And that means that I'm guaranteed there's going to be some consistency between cloud service provider offerings, and there is going to be some capability for me to host it myself if I need to. So Postgres on RDS, Postgres in a Kubernetes container, Postgres managed on Azure, they all still look and smell like Postgres. And really that's what we've been trying to do, and why we would consider agnosticism at all in our cloud estate.
Thanks, guys. There's another question here from Elliot. How do you take finance and commercial stakeholders on the cloud transformation journey?
Yeah, I can kind of jump in here if that's okay. So I think obviously you'd have to look into the different compliance and standards and frameworks that you would need to adhere to, and get the confidence from them by looking into those things, and obviously having a very clear DevSecOps type policy as well for the tech team and the organization, so you can look at all the changes that happen across the tech estate and actually have an audit of those things that have happened as well. And obviously guarantee that the delivery of the project is obviously pending an audit against those frameworks as well, that you need to adhere to for compliance reasons. So that's how I would approach that.
I think to add to it from a business perspective, at the end of the day, your cloud migrations or transitions is all about how does it benefit the business. When we did our migrations, we had this lifetime value for our customers if we did these migrations, and we actually had to put an effort to think about what is the cost benefit of actual migrations, which I think with any tech kind of projects, it becomes quite essential to think about cost to the business and the value that you're getting out of it. And it's the same even with the cloud migrations.
Excellent, thanks. I'll keep with Nayana if possible. A question from David. It says the comment Nayana made about not being comfortable with having data outside the organization is an argument you hear often. However, just because it's in the cloud, is it still in your organization? The storage is irrelevant. The access is exclusive to you and your organization only.
I do agree that if we put the right checks in place, and if we make sure that you can store data in the cloud, but if they are encrypted at rest, then it is still protected. But at the end of the day, it is the confidence of business with some of these things. So as I was saying in the example I gave with investigative journalism, the kind of data that they would have collected is that, I'm not sure if journalists are still at the point where they're comfortable to actually let it live outside of even things like their own hard drives and pen drives and stuff. So I think it depends on the criticality of that data. And in 95% of the use cases, if we have made sure that we've got the right permissions in place and the right security policies and access controls in place, then it is within the organization. Amazon wouldn't actually go into your data and start looking at your data.
I think one thing as well is that there's also the point that I think it was Chris was talking about earlier, that a huge company like Amazon has so many eyes on their security and their audits and policies that can you really trust that your own personal organization can do a better job? It's weighing up that risk. Is it better to encrypt and have it in the cloud versus better to do your own encryption and think you've got it right and look after it in your own servers? Tricky decision.
Yeah, I guess the cloud makes that a lot easier as well, right? I mean, security is now a commodity or a click of a button, and there's really strong audit trails as well in the cloud. And majority of the cloud providers, that again makes this a lot easier. So yeah, it seems like it's that culture and mindset change that needs to happen in order to kind of make people a bit more comfortable.
Thanks, guys. A few more questions here. One from Artie. Hi, Artie, by the way. What is the correct definition of DevOps, and how important is getting this definition right at first? I've heard many definitions thrown around, or the DevOps term thrown around, and I worry that what DevOps is to me could mean something else to another person.
I can kick off. This is a very loaded question, and I don't know if I'm going to get it right as well, so we will try this. So I often use this CAMS model to actually define what DevOps is. So it's got culture, automation, measurements, and sharing. So make sure your culture is right to get innovation and your product delivery. And you need good automation and tools to support you on this journey. And then like the hardest bit to get right is the measurements. And we were talking about DORA metrics earlier. I've often found this being very hard to actually figure out if we are really DevOps and what it means. But yeah, I think measuring and gathering your user data on a regular basis to make sure that your the changes that you've made in your culture and in your automation has actually benefited and added value is quite important. And the last one is sharing, which is we have to be a lot more collaborative within our organization and pairing, mobbing, whatever different methods you use to do this. I think that is part of the whole DevOps journey and stuff.
So I have a position on this, which is that as per the meme that cycled around the internet some years ago, DevOps isn't a job title. DevOps is a culture, and everybody likes to draw the Venn diagrams with Dev and Ops and the DevOps in the middle. It's not really that either, right? It's like agile is a culture, and it's all a bit buzzwordy. But what are we really talking about? What we're really talking about is lean management in IT service delivery teams. That's what we're talking about. We're saying that rather than having handoffs between functions, in order to get a product out of the door, we bring a cross-functional group of people together and let them work very collaboratively together. And the DevOps as a culture bit is that. But then there's also, when we go into the recruitment circles, we hire for DevOps engineers. And what does that mean? And to me, we have hired infrastructure automation engineers. So there is a specific set of tools which a lot of come in conjunction with the cloud, although the two don't necessarily have to go together, like Terraform, Ansible, Packer, this kind of ecosystem. And those tools require people who know traditional IT infrastructure and they know software engineering. And those people get bracketed as DevOps engineers, but they aren't. They're infrastructure automation engineers. They're people who understand infrastructure and people who understand coding. And they are also unicorns and incredibly hard to hire, but never mind. But certainly whenever I've been asked this kind of question, it's those two different things, right? There's a cultural advocacy piece, and then there is a specific niche set of skills and maybe a team around them or a way to embed them. There we are.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that all the panelists have said. And I guess the main outcome as well is to try and shift left, right? So through this collaboration and working together, you're kind of shifting a lot of, a lot of the dependencies earlier in the development lifecycle and collaborating earlier on and iterating around those improvements as well. So yeah, I kind of agree with everything that Chris and Naya have said as well.
I think it encompasses a lot of ideologies, and I'd try not to get too hung up on what it means and what it doesn't mean. It probably doesn't really matter what we label it. In a few years, we'll probably label it as something else. But take the best ideas, take the ones that work for you, the ones that fit with your organization, and try not to worry too much about what you call it.
I would say that if you are looking at team structures and how that enables fast flow, I've been quite, just finished up reading a book called Team Topologies, which is a really good book that kind of really shows you the value of the collaboration and how it, moves your focus on the core competencies of a business and how a DevOps culture can also enable for that. So have a read of the Team Topologies book as well. So really awesome read.
Thanks, guys. One or two more questions. We're just conscious of time. This one's from. It doesn't look like you. Sorry, Siri. Ilya, you can run Kubernetes cluster on EC2. You can use ECS to abstract some things. You can go to Fargate to abstract even more things, but also have less control on what is happening under the hood. He says, is there such a thing as too much innovation? How do you decide when to stop?
I guess my question is losing control over under the hood. Why do you need that control? I mean, is there a business requirement or a technology requirement that's supporting the business that says that you need that granular control? Or is it just because you want that control? And really, if it's focusing on supporting the business value, then commoditizing one layer up, so let's say to Fargate, and you just focusing on the container and the ability for the developers to just ship code quicker, that's where the focus should be. In terms of innovation, I'm not sure why that's a bad thing, right? I'm trying to understand why that could be a bad thing. If you mean that if all teams are focusing on innovation, thus not focusing on keeping the lights on and making sure that the operational side of the infrastructure is maintained, then what I would say is focus on what is important to maintain. So commoditize and use managed services as much as possible so that your operational overhead is very much focused on the things that need to be maintained internally. So get that balance right is a thing that needs to happen, a discovery phase that needs to happen.
Yeah, and just following on from what Abs is saying there as well, and drawing upon Abs's points, that there's a really good model that you can draw out, right, when deciding what to build. It's the difference between criticality and differentiation as well for you as a business and as a tech team. And I think a lot of those platforms and things, they can sit in the bottom right-hand corner in terms of the criticality being on the y-axis. And yeah, so it's something to consider there. How much time do you want to spend looking after the operations of things like that? Because Kubernetes, etc., they are big beasts of platforms. You need to put in a lot of work. You need to have a lot of specialist skills to look at those things as well. So yeah, that's something to consider.
Thanks. And just the last question, if that's okay. Cloud is obviously massively elastic. How do you secure a hugely distributed environment at scale with a huge amount of real-time data? That's from Paul.
I'm happy to jump in there since that's effectively my job right now. So Kafka, obviously lots of real-time data coming in, huge tens of thousands of instances. How do you secure them? Each cloud provider provides, as I think Abs coined it, as commodity security in many ways. There are lots of features and tools that you can use to help you in this. You can use, as KMS, EBS volumes can be encrypted at rest, object storage can be encrypted, and there's so many different tools and capabilities for doing in-flight encryption. There's the questions that Nayana's raised about, do you trust your cloud provider, and can they have the data? It depends on the data, it depends on your organization. But lots of companies have successfully managed this. We offer a bring your own key service. So in that scenario, for example, for Nayana, you give us access to your key, you grant us access to it via KMS. There's lots of auditing and capabilities that hook in with the existing cloud platform to achieve this. So don't be scared of it. It's possible. You can do it. There's tools out there. It's probably too long a topic to give you a short paragraph answer to, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, I think in my experience with securing elastic workloads, important thing is to pick your vendors carefully. If you're relying on, you know, a Symantec or a Trend Micro or something like this, you have to be careful about which vendors you're using and making sure that they understand the nature of the workload and the nature of the elasticity. So in days past, I've worked with security solutions that expect fixed IPs and host names for servers. And when you scale from 10 servers to 1,000 servers and then back to a different 10 overnight, you know, that kind of configuration just doesn't work at all. So, and some security vendors really understand that and have engineered so that you have effective controls in those kind of elastic use cases, and other security vendors expect you to have a fixed flat network with a fixed set of IP addresses and a fixed set of host names. So yeah, but you have to be prepared to compromise somewhere in order to get to the security posture that you want.
Thanks very much, guys. There's a few more questions, but I'm conscious of time and it's sunny outside. But yeah, thanks very much. There will be a blog we're writing in around a week's time. If you do have more questions, just refer to our LinkedIn this afternoon. There'll be a post on this event. We'll tag the panelists in, and it'll also be this has been recorded. So if any of your colleagues that couldn't make it and you want the recording, then just give us a shout, and we'll be happy to send that across to you. But yeah, thanks very much. We could have spoken probably for another 45 minutes an hour or so. But yeah, thanks to everyone involved, and thanks for the high attendance as well. It's been a good number on the webinar. So thanks very much, guys, and take it easy.